Mr. Harrison, a man whose tailored suits always seemed a size too small, reflecting his puffed-up ego, strode through the gleaming office building. He was known, less affectionately, as Hurricane Harrison by his staff. His demands were sharp, his patience thin, and his criticisms, often delivered with a sneer, were legendary. He saw the world as a ladder, and he was determined to climb it, stepping on anyone who got in his way. Tonight, the ladder felt particularly slippery. A major deal, the kind that made careers, was crumbling before his eyes. He felt the pressure mounting, a familiar tension headache throbbing behind his temples. Someone would pay for this. He needed to work late, to salvage what he could. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting long shadows down the deserted hallways. It was on the executive floor that Walter quietly went about his duties. Walter, a man of few words, moved with a quiet efficiency. His grey uniform was spotless, his shoes shined to a mirror gloss. He pushed his cleaning cart along the hallway, the soft whir of the wheels barely audible. He was older, his face etched with lines that spoke of a life lived with purpose and perhaps a touch of hardship. On his left wrist, just visible beneath the cuff of his sleeve, was a faded tattoo, an eagle clutching an anchor. He polished desks with a practiced hand, his movements deliberate and precise, as if each action was a carefully planned mission. He carried himself with a certain dignity, an understated strength that hinted at a life far removed from the mundane task of cleaning office buildings. The faint scent of Old Spice clung to him, a comforting aroma in the sterile environment. He was almost finished with the floor, eager to get home to his quiet apartment and a well-deserved cup of tea. The numbers swam before Mr. Harrison's eyes on the computer screen. Red ink splashed across the spreadsheets like a fresh wound. He slammed his fist on the desk, the sound echoing in the empty office. "This is a disaster," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. The deal, a merger that would have solidified his position, was falling apart due to a series of unforeseen complications and, frankly, his own mismanagement. He needed a scapegoat, someone to blame for his failings. He couldn't possibly admit his own mistakes, that was simply not in his nature. The pressure was building, a volcano about to erupt. He swiveled in his chair, his gaze sweeping across the pristine office, searching, almost instinctively, for a target. He needed to vent, to unleash his frustration on someone, anyone, who dared to cross his path. Mr. Harrison spotted Walter just as the janitor was emptying a trash can near his office door. "You," he barked, the sound sharp and accusatory. Walter turned, his expression neutral, almost unreadable. "Yes, sir," he replied, his voice calm and even. Mr. Harrison stormed toward him. "Is this the best you can do? This office is a disgrace. I can see dust bunnies breeding under my desk." He gestured wildly, not even bothering to lower his voice. "I pay good money for this building to be kept spotless. Are you even trying?" He paused, his face flushed with anger. "Or are you just collecting a paycheck and doing nothing?" The accusation hung in the air, heavy and unfair. Walter simply stood there, his gaze steady, absorbing the verbal assault. "Sir," Walter began, his voice still even, "I understand your frustration. I cleaned this office thoroughly earlier this evening. Perhaps the dust you see accumulated after I finished." He paused, then added, "I take pride in my work." Mr. Harrison scoffed. "Pride? You call this pride? My standards are clearly much higher than yours." He leaned in closer, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe you should consider a different line of work. Something less demanding." He punctuated his sentence with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have important matters to attend to. Try to make this place presentable before I leave, will you?" He turned on his heel, ready to retreat back into his office, confident that he had put the lowly janitor in his place. But he wasn't quite finished. As he reached the doorway, he tossed over his shoulder and maybe learned to use a dust rag properly. A young woman, Sarah, a junior analyst, had been working late in a nearby cubicle. She'd overheard the entire exchange and winced at Mr. Harrison's words. She admired Walter's quiet dignity and was appalled by Mr. Harrison's behavior. She peeked over the partition, a worried expression on her face. She wanted to say something, to defend Walter, but she feared Mr. Harrison's wrath. He was known for holding grudges. She cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Harrison," she began hesitantly, "I'm sure Walter is doing his best." Mr. Harrison cut her off with a sharp glare. "Sarah, this is none of your concern. I suggest you focus on your own work." He turned back to Walter, his voice laced with venom. "Did I give you permission to speak?" "No?" "Then be silent and do your job." He finally disappeared into his office, slamming the door behind him. Sarah shrank back into her cubicle, her heart pounding. She felt terrible for Walter. As Mr. Harrison stormed off, a folder slipped from his grasp, unnoticed in his rage. It landed silently on the carpet, a thick collection of documents bound together with a simple clip. These were the confidential papers related to the failing merger, containing sensitive financial information, strategic plans, and legal agreements. They were the key to the entire deal, and now they lay exposed in the hallway, vulnerable to anyone who might stumble upon them. Mr. Harrison, consumed by his anger and self-importance, was completely oblivious to his carelessness. He was too busy stewing in his own frustration to realize the potential disaster that lay at his feet. He had bigger things to worry about than a misplaced folder, or so he thought. The irony, of course, was that this seemingly insignificant mistake would soon have a profound impact on his life. Walter watched Mr. Harrison disappear into his office, his expression unchanged. He sighed softly, then resumed his cleaning. As he pushed his cart further down the hallway, he noticed the folder lying on the floor. He stopped, his eyes narrowing slightly. He recognized the company logo on the cover, the same logo that adorned the building, the same logo that represented the livelihood of so many people. He hesitated for a moment, then bent down and picked it up. The clip was loose, and the top page had partially slipped out, revealing snippets of text filled with numbers and legal jargon. He didn't understand the specifics, but he understood the gravity of the situation. Important documents like these shouldn't be left lying around. They were valuable and vulnerable. Walter walked to Mr. Harrison's door and knocked softly. He waited patiently, the folder held securely in his hand. After a moment, Mr. Harrison yanked the door open, his face still contorted with anger. "What is it now?" he snapped. Walter held out the folder. "Sir, you dropped this." Mr. Harrison glanced at the folder, then back at Walter, his expression shifting from anger to annoyance. "So? What do you want, a medal?" He reached for the folder dismissively. Walter didn't release his grip. "Sir," he said quietly, "these documents appear to be quite important. Leaving them unattended could have consequences." He paused, his gaze steady. "Confidentiality is important, sir. Especially in times like these." He finally released the folder into Mr. Harrison's hand. Mr. Harrison snatched the folder, a flicker of something akin to gratitude in his eyes, quickly masked by his usual arrogance. He started to close the door, but Sarah, emboldened by Walter's quiet courage, stepped forward. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm, "I think you should know. Walter is a veteran. A highly decorated one. He served our country with honor." She paused, taking a deep breath. "He received the Silver Star for bravery." Mr. Harrison froze, his hand still on the door. He looked from Sarah to Walter, his face paling slightly. The dismissive sneer vanished, replaced by a dawning realization. He stared at Walter, truly seeing him for the first time, not as a lowly janitor, but as a man who had risked his life for his country. The eagle and anchor tattoo suddenly made sense. The quiet dignity, the unwavering gaze. It all clicked into place. A wave of shame washed over Mr. Harrison. The realization of his appalling behavior hit him with full force. He had belittled and insulted a man who had selflessly served his country, a man who possessed a level of integrity he could only dream of. He felt his stomach churn. He had judged Walter based on his job, on his uniform, on his perceived social status, completely missing the person beneath. The weight of his arrogance pressed down on him, suffocating him. He wanted to disappear, to rewind time and erase his words. 7 minutes. It had only been 7 minutes since he'd started his tirade, but it felt like a lifetime. Now, those 7 minutes stretched before him like an insurmountable chasm. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he had to apologize. But how could he possibly atone for such egregious behavior? Asterisk flashback sequence begin star. The air crackled with gunfire. Young Walter, barely out of his teens, dove for cover behind a crumbling wall, bullets whizzing past his head. He was a medic, and his job was to save lives, even in the face of overwhelming danger. A shout pierced the chaos. One of his comrades was down, caught in a crossfire. Without hesitation, Walter scrambled out from behind the wall, exposing himself to enemy fire. He raced towards the fallen soldier, ignoring the bullets that kicked up dust around him. He reached the wounded man, quickly assessed his injuries, and began to administer first aid, all while under intense enemy fire. He shielded the soldier with his own body, risking his life to protect another. It was an act of selfless courage, an act that would earn him the Silver Star and the undying gratitude of the man whose life he had saved. Asterisk flashback sequence end star. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, his voice raspy. "Walter," he began, his gaze lowered, I owe you an apology. A sincere one." He looked up, meeting Walter's eyes, searching for any sign of forgiveness. "My behavior was inexcusable. I was stressed about the deal, and I took it out on you. That was wrong. Very wrong." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "I had no right to speak to you that way. Especially knowing what you've done." He gestured vaguely, unable to fully articulate the depth of his regret. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Walter remained silent, his expression still unreadable. He simply nodded slowly, acknowledging Mr. Harrison's apology, but offering no further response. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Mr. Harrison wouldn't give up. "I know an apology isn't enough," he continued, his voice laced with sincerity. "I want to make amends. Is there anything I can do? Anything at all?" He fidgeted, unaccustomed to being in a position of such humility. Perhaps I could make a donation to a veterans charity in your name," he offered, hoping to find some way to bridge the gap between his words and his actions. He truly felt terrible for his behavior. He understood that trust was earned, not given, and he had a long way to go to earn Walter's respect. He knew he had to keep trying. He had to show Walter that he was genuinely sorry. He had to prove that he was capable of change. Walter finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "It's not about the money, sir," he said, shaking his head slightly. "It's about respect. Respect for everyone, regardless of their job or their background." He paused, his gaze steady. "In the military, we learn to rely on each other, to trust each other, no matter what. We were a team. We treated each other with respect because we knew our lives depended on it." He looked directly at Mr. Harrison. "That's what's missing here, sir. Respect." He sighed softly. "I've seen a lot in my life, Mr. Harrison. I've seen the best and the worst of humanity. And I've learned that respect is the foundation of everything." Mr. Harrison listened intently, absorbing Walter's words. He realized that Walter wasn't just talking about superficial politeness, he was talking about a deep-seated respect for human dignity, for the inherent worth of every individual. It was a lesson Mr. Harrison had clearly forgotten, or perhaps never truly learned. He thought about his own behavior, about the way he routinely dismissed and belittled his employees, about the way he valued power and status above all else. He saw himself, reflected in Walter's calm, steady gaze, and he didn't like what he saw. He understood now that his arrogance had blinded him to the true value of the people around him. He finally understood what Walter meant about teamwork and reliance, and he began to wonder if that was the key to salvaging the failing deal. A faint smile touched Walter's lips, the first genuine expression he had shown since Mr. Harrison's initial outburst. "Apology accepted, Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice softening slightly. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them." He paused, then added, "And sometimes, the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected places." He glanced around the office, then back at Mr. Harrison. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a floor to finish cleaning." He turned to resume his work, but Mr. Harrison stopped him. He felt like he was finally earning some respect back. He also felt like he was learning something valuable. He was eager to learn more. "Walter," Mr. Harrison said hesitantly, "I know this is a lot to ask, especially after how I treated you, but I'm in a bit of a bind with this merger. You mentioned teamwork and relying on each other. In your experience, what's the key to bringing people together, even when things get tough?" He paused, his pride momentarily forgotten. "I'm not sure I know how to do that anymore. I've been so focused on being in charge that I forgot how to be a leader." He looked genuinely lost and vulnerable. He really needed help. This was not something he was capable of doing alone. Walter considered the question carefully. He leaned against his cleaning cart, his gaze distant, as if recalling past experiences. "In my experience," he said slowly, "the key to any successful team is communication, trust, and a shared sense of purpose." He looked back at Mr. Harrison. Everyone needs to know what the goal is, and everyone needs to feel like their contribution is valued. And most importantly, everyone needs to trust that their teammates have their backs. He paused, then added, "It's like a chain, Mr. Harrison. The chain is only as strong as its weakest link. You need to identify the weak links and strengthen them, not break them." He then said also, "Always make sure everyone has each other's backs, that's the most important." Mr. Harrison took Walter's words to heart. The next day, he called a meeting with his entire team, including Sarah and even some of the junior staff he usually ignored. He started by apologizing for his past behavior, acknowledging that he hadn't been the best leader. Then, he laid out the challenges facing the merger, being transparent about the difficulties. He asked for their input, genuinely listening to their ideas and concerns. He made sure everyone understood their role and how it contributed to the overall goal. He praised good work and offered support to those who were struggling. He created a sense of shared purpose and mutual respect. He made sure everyone knew that he had their backs. And he made sure everyone had each other's backs. The atmosphere in the office transformed. People who had once been hesitant to speak up now freely shared their ideas. Problems that had seemed insurmountable were tackled collaboratively. The merger, which had been on the brink of collapse, was salvaged through the combined efforts of a united team. Mr. Harrison, now a true leader, guided the process with humility and respect. He delegated tasks, empowered his employees, and celebrated their successes. The deal closed, exceeding all expectations. The company thrived, and Mr. Harrison's reputation was not only restored but enhanced. He had learned a valuable lesson: true success comes not from power and arrogance, but from teamwork and respect. He also realized that Walter was the wisest man he had ever met. At the celebratory company party, Mr. Harrison stepped onto the stage, a genuine smile on his face. He thanked his team for their hard work and dedication, acknowledging their individual contributions. Then, he paused, his gaze sweeping across the room until it landed on Walter, who was standing quietly near the back. "But," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "there's one person in particular I want to thank tonight. A man who taught me a valuable lesson about respect and leadership." He gestured towards Walter. "Walter, please come up here." The room erupted in applause as Walter, looking slightly embarrassed, made his way to the stage. Mr. Harrison shook his hand warmly. Without Walter's wisdom and guidance, he said, this deal would have never happened. "Thank you, Walter. From the bottom of my heart." From that day forward, Mr. Harrison and Walter formed an unlikely friendship. They often met for coffee in the mornings, discussing everything from business strategies to life lessons. Mr. Harrison valued Walter's wisdom and experience, and Walter appreciated Mr. Harrison's willingness to learn and grow. They came from different worlds, but they found common ground in their shared respect for each other. They learned from each other, challenged each other, and supported each other. Mr. Harrison learned about Walter's military service, his sacrifices, and his unwavering commitment to integrity. Walter learned about Mr. Harrison's struggles, his ambitions, and his capacity for change. They were an odd pair, but their friendship was genuine and profound. They even went fishing together. Mr. Harrison's transformation extended beyond his relationship with Walter. He became a more approachable and empathetic leader. He listened to his employees, valued their opinions, and treated them with respect. He mentored young talent, encouraged teamwork, and celebrated successes. He understood that a company's greatest asset was its people, and he invested in their growth and well-being. He stopped being Hurricane Harrison and started being known as just Harry, a respected and admired leader. He even started volunteering at a local veterans center, inspired by Walter's service and dedication. He made sure everyone had a good work-life balance. He was a changed man. Sarah, who had witnessed the entire incident, was deeply inspired by Mr. Harrison's transformation. She admired his humility and his willingness to learn from his mistakes. She saw how his leadership had empowered the team and created a more positive and productive work environment. She realized that even the most arrogant individuals were capable of change, and that everyone deserved a second chance. She started taking more initiative in her own work, speaking up in meetings, and offering her ideas. She even volunteered to help Mr. Harrison with his work at the Veterans Center. She knew that she wanted to be a leader like him someday, a leader who valued people and inspired them to be their best selves. Years later, Mr. Harrison and Walter sat side by side on a park bench, fishing rods in hand. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the lake. They were silent for a moment, enjoying the peace and tranquility. "You know, Walter," Mr. Harrison said, breaking the silence, "I often think about that night. The night I insulted you. I was such an idiot." Walter chuckled softly. "We all make mistakes, Harry. The important thing is that you learned from it." Mr. Harrison smiled. "You taught me a valuable lesson, my friend. A lesson I'll never forget." He paused, then added, "It's not about what someone does for a living, or what kind of clothes they wear. It's about who they are on the inside. It's about their character, their integrity, their heart." Walter nodded in agreement. "That's right, Harry. That's all that matters in the end." They shared a comfortable silence, two unlikely friends, bound together by a shared understanding and mutual respect. The story is about never judging a book by its cover.